The city skyline glowed behind the tall glass walls of the office, bathed in soft morning light. Everything about the space was pristine. The polished desk, the leather chairs, the perfectly arranged files. A reflection of the man who owned it. Alexander Grant, the youngest CEO in the company's history, stood near the window with a phone pressed to his ear, discussing numbers, strategies, profits. His voice was calm, commanding, the kind that made people listen before thinking. But even as he spoke, there was a weariness in his eyes, the kind that comes from years of chasing something that never quite fills the emptiness. He ended the call, exhaling deeply, when the soft creak of the office door broke the silence. He turned and froze. There, standing in the doorway, was a little girl, barely 5 years old, wearing a red lace dress that contrasted against the dull gray of the office. Her hair was tied into 2 small pigtails with red ribbons, slightly uneven, as if done by someone not used to dressing a child. She clutched a folded envelope in both hands, holding it close to her chest like something precious. Alexander blinked, confused. His assistant hadn't mentioned any appointments. "Sweetheart, are you lost?" he asked, his tone soft but unsure. The girl shook her head, her small lips pressed tightly together. Then, with quiet determination, she stepped closer. Her shoes made the faintest sound on the carpet, each step filled with courage that didn't quite fit her tiny frame. When she finally reached him, she looked up, eyes wide, innocent, and full of something he hadn't seen in years. Raw sincerity. "Can you read this letter?" she asked, holding out the envelope with trembling fingers. "It's very important." The words hit him harder than expected. Her voice wasn't timid, it was careful, deliberate, like she was repeating something her heart had memorized. He crouched down to her level, his expression softening despite himself. "Who is it from?" She hesitated for a moment, her gaze dropping to the floor. "My mommy," she said quietly. She said it's for you." For him? The confusion deepened. He slowly took the envelope, noticing her tiny fingerprints smudged along the edges. It was slightly crumpled, the kind of paper that had been held too tightly, maybe even slept with. He turned it over, no name, no address, just his title written in shaky, uneven handwriting. To Mr. Grant. Something in his chest tightened. He looked back at the little girl. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily," she whispered. Her voice wavered, and for a brief moment her eyes shimmered with tears. "Mommy said you'd remember her." Alexander frowned slightly, trying to recall her, but the truth was he couldn't. Not yet. Still, something about the way Lily looked at him, not with fear but with trust, made his throat ache. He gestured toward one of the chairs. "Come here, Lily," he said softly. "Let's see what your mommy wanted to say." As she climbed onto the chair, her small legs swinging nervously, Alexander carefully unfolded the letter, unaware that the words inside would soon change everything he believed about himself and what it truly meant to be human. Alexander's fingers hesitated on the edge of the envelope. It felt heavier than paper should, as if the weight of a heart was sealed inside. The room around him seemed to still. Even the hum of the city outside grew faint. Lily sat quietly across from him, her little hands folded neatly on her lap, her eyes following every movement he made. He slowly pulled out the letter. The handwriting was unsteady, ink slightly faded, the lines uneven, but it was unmistakably human. The kind of handwriting that told a story before a single word was read. As his eyes moved across the first line, something in his chest tightened. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay." He paused. The words seemed to echo louder than any noise could. He glanced up at Lily, the way she hugged herself, her legs swinging gently, unaware of the storm she had carried into his world. He looked back down, forcing himself to continue. "My name is Claire. I used to work for your company. Just another face you passed in the hallway. You probably don't remember me, and that's okay. I don't blame you. But I remembered you." His breath caught slightly. The name Claire tugged at something distant. He remembered faintly. A quiet woman from accounting or maybe administration. Always polite. Always early. He hadn't noticed her much. In his world, faces blurred into tasks and titles, but now the name carried a pulse. He kept reading, slower this time, as if afraid to break the fragile voice living in the words. "I wanted to thank you. You never knew it, but once a small kindness from you changed my life. It was just a moment. You stayed late one night and helped me carry a box I dropped near the elevator. You said, "It looks like you've had a long day." No one had said that to me in years. You didn't know how much that mattered. He stopped. His throat felt dry. That memory, young, blurry but real, fiery, flickered in his mind. A woman, quiet, apologetic, and him too busy to think much of it. But she had remembered. He continued reading, his voice low, almost trembling now. "I didn't have much, but I had my daughter, Lily. She's the light of my life. She doesn't know the world the way we do. She still believes in good people. I wanted her to meet one someday, so I told her about you, about the kind man who helped a stranger when no one else did." Alexander's vision blurred for a second. He blinked hard, staring down at the looping letters. Each sentence felt like a mirror, showing him a version of himself he barely recognized. He turned his gaze toward Lily. She was watching him carefully, her small face unreadable. "Your mother," he began softly, but his voice broke before he could finish. She tilted her head, clutching her little red dress. "She said you'd help me," she said simply. Alexander swallowed hard, folding the letter gently as if afraid it might fall apart. "I will," he said, the words escaping him before he could think. "I promise." The promise felt strange on his tongue, heavy, unfamiliar, but right. He stood up slowly and walked to the window, staring out at the skyline that had once been his kingdom. For the first time, it looked smaller. The city lights that had always made him feel powerful now just reminded him how alone he'd been. Behind him, Lily's voice broke the silence again, soft, almost a whisper. "Do you miss your mommy too?" The question struck him like a chord. He turned around slowly, his expression softening. "Every day," he said quietly. And for the first time in years, Alexander Grant felt something he couldn't measure in numbers or success. A quiet ache in his chest that reminded him what it meant to care. "You said expand scene 3 without headings," ChatGPT said. Alexander sat behind his desk, the letter still resting in front of him. He hadn't moved for minutes, maybe longer. The city outside had begun to shift in color, sunlight spilling warmer and gentler through the glass walls. It painted golden stripes across the sleek floor, across the man who had everything but suddenly felt like he had nothing. Lily was still there, sitting on one of the leather chairs too big for her small frame. Her legs didn't reach the floor, so she swung them slowly, her red dress brushing against her knees. She watched him quietly, sensing something in his silence. Children always could. He finally lifted his gaze toward her. "How long ago?" He stopped, struggling to form the question. "How long ago did your mother?" Lily's little voice interrupted, calm but fragile. "A few weeks ago." She looked down at her shoes. "She got really tired. Then she went to sleep and didn't wake up." The room felt colder, though the sun still poured in. Alexander's chest tightened painfully. He had read those words. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay, but hearing them spoken through the daughter's voice shattered something deeper. He leaned back slowly, his hand covering his mouth, trying to steady himself. For years, he had thought he was immune to emotion. He'd seen employees come and go, losses and gains, lives that intersected with his only in signatures and numbers. But this wasn't a number. It was a little girl with ribbons in her hair and eyes too brave for her age. "Where are you staying now, Lily?" he asked, his voice quieter. She hesitated, then looked up. "At the shelter near the park," she said softly. "The lady there said they'll find me a new home soon, but Mommy said you'd help before they do." He felt a sharp ache deep in his chest, like a truth he'd been running from, the kind of ache no success could erase. He rose from his chair and walked around the desk until he was standing in front of her. Kneeling down, he looked into her eyes, blue and clear, yet filled with a loneliness he recognized. "Lily," he said gently, "your mother. She worked here, didn't she?" She nodded. "She said she liked her job because she could see the sky from the big windows." That line broke him. He looked at the same sky now, the endless blue framed by steel and glass, and realized how many people he'd overlooked beneath it. People like Claire. People who worked quietly, lived quietly, and left quietly. He looked back at Lily, his voice trembling slightly. "Did she ever tell you what she wanted for you?" The little girl nodded, smiling faintly through her sadness. "She said she wanted me to be brave, and to find someone who remembers her." Alexander's throat tightened again. He reached out, gently brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "Then you found him," he whispered. She blinked, surprised. "You remember her?" He looked down, ashamed. Not the way I should have, he admitted softly. But I will now. I promise. Lily's small hand reached out and touched his wrist. It was such a small gesture, but it steadied him in a way he hadn't felt in years. Mommy said you were a good man, she said with quiet certainty. Alexander's eyes glistened as he smiled faintly. Your mommy was very kind, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe too kind for this world. A long silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty. It was full of something new, something fragile and human. He glanced back at the letter on his desk, then at the child before him. For the first time, he didn't see her as a responsibility or a stranger's daughter. He saw her as a chance to do something right. Outside, the sunlight shifted again, falling directly over them, as if the world itself was listening. The city lights glimmered like distant stars against the tall windows of Alexander's penthouse, the kind of view people dreamed of but never really lived in. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock and the occasional whisper of the wind brushing against the glass. On the table sat two untouched plates, one of fine silverware and porcelain and the other a small plastic tray from a takeout bag Lily had picked earlier. Alexander sat across from her, still wearing his work shirt, sleeves rolled up, the top button undone. His usual confidence had been replaced with a quiet uncertainty. He didn't know how to talk to children. His world had always been built around meetings, deadlines, and numbers, not crayons, bedtime stories, or the soft laughter of a little girl trying to fill the silence. Lily, however, didn't seem afraid of the quiet. She was drawing on a napkin with one of his expensive pens, her tongue poking out in concentration. I'm making you, she said, eyes focused. He blinked, caught off guard. Me? Mm-hmm. She turned the napkin around to show him a stick figure in a suit standing beside a much smaller one holding a balloon. That's you, she said proudly, pointing at the taller one. And that's me. Alexander stared at it longer than he should have. The drawing was messy, imperfect, yet it had more warmth than his entire apartment. His throat tightened as he smiled faintly. You're quite the artist. Lily grinned, brushing her curls from her face. Mommy used to say that too. She said drawing makes people remember. He nodded slowly, his smile fading. She was right. For a moment, the air thickened again. The sound of the clock seemed louder now, echoing through the big empty room that suddenly felt too quiet for both of them. Alexander stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the glittering cityscape. Do you miss her a lot? He asked gently. Lily didn't answer right away. She placed the pen down, folding her small hands in her lap. Every night, she said softly. But I think she can still see me. Maybe even now. He turned toward her, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. You really believe that? She nodded without hesitation. Mommy said love doesn't stop when people go away, it just changes where it lives. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He swallowed, unable to speak for a moment. This child spoke with a wisdom far beyond her years. Words her mother must have whispered on her last nights, knowing Lily would need them more than anything. Alexander walked back and sat beside her, resting his elbows on the table. Lily, he began, hesitating. What did your mother tell you about me? The girl thought for a second. She said you helped her once, when nobody else did. She said she wanted to thank you but never got the chance. He frowned slightly, searching his memory. There were so many faces, so many employees, so many small moments lost to time. But somewhere deep down he recalled a woman who'd come to him one evening years ago. Her name tag had read Claire. She'd asked for an advance to cover hospital bills. He had approved it without thinking much of it, a rare gesture of kindness in a career built on indifference. I remember her, he said softly. She was kind, quiet, always smiling. Lily smiled faintly as though hearing that made her mother reel again. She said you were her angel that day. He looked at her, his chest tightening. I wasn't, he murmured. But maybe it's time I try to be one for you. Lily tilted her head. What do you mean? He leaned forward, his voice gentle but sure. It means you don't have to stay at that shelter anymore. Her eyes widened, unsure if she heard him right. You mean, I can stay here? He nodded slowly, a small, sincere smile forming. If you'd like to, just until we figure things out. She stared at him for a long moment, then suddenly stood up, running around the table to throw her tiny arms around him. It startled him at first. He wasn't used to being touched, to being needed. But as her little head pressed against his chest and her voice whispered, Thank you. Something inside him softened. He wrapped his arms around her carefully as though afraid she might break. You're welcome, Lily, he whispered back. For the first time in years, the penthouse didn't feel like a museum of success, it felt like a home. The city outside kept shining, unaware that somewhere high above, a man who'd forgotten what it meant to feel had just found a reason to start again. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows, painting soft golden lines across the marble floor. For once, Alexander wasn't the first to wake. The faint sound of humming floated through the apartment, a small, sweet melody carried by a child's voice. He followed the sound to the living room where he found Lily sitting cross-legged on the rug, surrounded by sheets of paper, crayons scattered everywhere. Her red dress was replaced by one of his oversized t-shirts that hung down to her knees. She looked up as soon as she heard him, her face lighting up with a sleepy smile. "Good morning, Mr. Grant," she chirped. He blinked at her, caught off guard by how foreign and yet comforting it felt to hear someone say good morning in this quiet home. "You can call me Alex," he said with a soft smile, crouching down beside her. "What are you drawing today?" She held up a crayon drawing of a tall building with stick figures at the top. "That's your office," she said proudly. "And that's me and Mommy waving from the clouds." He froze, his breath catching in his throat. She said it so simply, so innocently, but it hit him like a blade. "The clouds?" he asked gently. "Uh-huh," Lily nodded, continuing to color. "Mommy said she'd always be watching from up there. She said when the light comes through the clouds, it means she's saying hello." Alexander looked toward the sunlight spilling through the glass. For years, it had just been light to him, a symbol of another day to conquer, another deal to close. But now it looked different, softer, alive. He glanced back at Lily. "You know," he said quietly, "I think she's saying hello right now." Lily smiled. "The kind that only children can. One that forgives the world no matter how cruel it's been." "Then we should wave back," she said matter-of-factly and raised her tiny hand toward the light. Alexander hesitated for a moment before doing the same. The two of them sat there, waving to a presence neither could see but both could feel. After a few quiet moments, Lily turned back to her drawing. "Are you going to work today?" she asked. He exhaled slowly, glancing at the pile of documents on the nearby table, his endless list of responsibilities, numbers, and meetings. But for the first time in years, they didn't seem so urgent. "Maybe later," he said. "Right now I think breakfast is more important." Her eyes widened. "You can cook?" He chuckled. "Not very well, but I can try." The next few minutes were filled with laughter, clattering pans, and small disasters. Flour dusted the counter, eggs cracked in the wrong place, and the pancakes looked more like lopsided circles. But Lily laughed with every mistake, her giggles echoing through the penthouse like music the walls hadn't heard in years. When they finally sat down at the table, Lily grinned as she stabbed her pancake with a fork. "Mommy used to say breakfast is happy food. It makes the day better." Alexander smiled faintly, watching her eat. "She was right again," he said softly. There was a pause. Lily looked up, her expression thoughtful. "Mr. Alex, are you happy?" He wasn't sure how to answer. He thought of all the days he had spent chasing success, the empty applause, the long nights alone with nothing but glass and silence. Then he looked at her, this little girl who had brought color into his gray world. "I think," he said slowly, "I'm starting to remember what happy feels like." Lily nodded approvingly. "Mommy would like that," she said, her small voice full of quiet certainty. Alexander looked out the window again. The city was still the same, loud, busy, endless. But something had shifted inside him. For the first time in years, the man who thought he had everything realized he had never truly lived. And it all began with a little girl, a letter, and a promise he intended to keep. Days turned into weeks, and life inside Alexander's penthouse slowly transformed into something that felt human. The sterile silence that once filled the place was now replaced with the soft hum of life. Laughter echoing down the hallway, little footsteps running across the floor, and the occasional off-key singing of a child pretending to perform for an invisible audience. Every morning, Lily would follow the same routine. She'd wait for him by the breakfast counter, swinging her legs off the tall stool while holding her crayon drawings. And every morning she'd show him something new. A house with a garden, a picture of her and her mom, or sometimes just the two of them. hand in hand beneath a big yellow sun. Alexander found himself rearranging his entire life around those drawings. Meetings were rescheduled, phone calls postponed, emails ignored. For years he had lived by the clock, but now he lived by her smile. One evening, after another long day at work, he returned home earlier than usual. He found Lily sitting by the window, her chin resting on her knees, staring out at the city lights. The soft glow from the street lamps reflected in her eyes. He placed his briefcase down quietly. "Hey, Lily," he said gently. "You didn't fall asleep yet?" She turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. "I was waiting for you," she said simply. He smiled faintly, sitting down beside her. "You didn't have to." "But I wanted to," she replied, leaning her head against his arm. "Mommy used to wait for me, too. She said some people are worth waiting for." The words sank into him deeper than she could possibly know. He looked out the window with her, the city glowing beneath them, so full of life yet strangely empty. "Your mom was a very wise woman," he murmured. Lily nodded softly. "She said you were always working hard because you wanted to make the world better." He swallowed hard. "She said that?" "Mm-hmm," Lily said. "She said even good people get lost sometimes." Her innocence was disarming. He turned his head slightly, studying her small face illuminated by the city lights. She wasn't saying it to comfort him. She was saying it because she believed it. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Lily," he said softly, "can I tell you something?" She looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. "What?" "I used to think work was everything," he said slowly. "I thought if I just made enough money, built something big enough, I wouldn't feel so empty anymore. But then you showed up with that letter, and now I realize what I was missing all along." "What were you missing?" she asked, tilting her head. He smiled faintly. "A reason." Lily thought about that for a moment, then leaned her head against his arm again. "Mommy said reasons are what make love stay," she whispered. He felt his throat tighten again. "She sounds like someone I wish I'd talked to more," he said quietly. "She liked you," Lily replied softly. "She said you were kind even if you didn't know it." For a long time, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, a man and a child watching the city breathe below them, two broken pieces of different worlds finding warmth in the same silence. When Lily's eyes began to flutter closed, Alexander gently lifted her into his arms and carried her to the guest room that had slowly turned into her space, now filled with stuffed animals, storybooks and drawings taped to the walls. He tucked her in, smoothing the blanket around her. Before leaving, he glanced at one of her newest drawings pinned beside the lamp. It showed him Lily and a woman with long hair standing in a field of flowers. Above them, in a child's uneven handwriting, were the words, "Mommy's always watching." Alexander stood there for a long moment, staring at it. His chest ached, not with grief this time, but with something gentler. Gratitude. He turned off the lamp and whispered into the quiet room, "I'm taking care of her, Claire. I promise." And for the first time in years, when he finally went to bed, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt peaceful. The morning sun spilled gently through the curtains, casting golden light over the penthouse. The scent of pancakes filled the air, and Lily's soft humming could be heard from the kitchen. She stood on her little stool, flipping pancakes with exaggerated seriousness, while wearing one of Alexander's oversized aprons. He leaned against the doorway, arms folded, watching her. The sight of her, tiny hands holding the spatula, brow furrowed in concentration, made something inside him soften. There had been a time when mornings meant only coffee and conference calls. Now they meant laughter, syrup, and stories. "Good morning, Chef Lily," he said, pretending to salute her. She turned with a proud grin. "You're just in time, Mr. Late for breakfast." He chuckled, walking over. "I had a very important dream meeting," he said playfully, sitting down. Lily giggled. "Was it about pancakes?" "Maybe," he said, lowering his voice dramatically. "But yours are better." She laughed, setting the plate in front of him. He took a bite, too much syrup, unevenly cooked, but to him it tasted perfect. As they ate, Lily pulled something from her pocket. A small envelope, slightly wrinkled, with his name written in her careful, uneven handwriting. "What's this?" he asked. "It's a secret," she said, her eyes sparkling. "You can't open it yet." "Not until I tell you." He smiled softly. "All right, I'll wait." She nodded firmly, clutching her glass of milk. Mommy used to say good things take time, like pancakes or promises. Her words made his chest tighten again, that bittersweet ache he'd learned to live with since she came into his world. After breakfast, Lily skipped off to her piano, where she began to play the soft tune her mother had written, the same melody she had played that first day when she entered his office, shy and scared. The notes filled the air, wrapping around him like a memory he never wanted to fade. He sat nearby quietly watching. She had improved so much. Her small fingers moved with confidence now. But more than the sound, it was the feeling behind the notes that moved him. There was hope in every key she touched. When she finished, she turned to him, eyes bright. "Did Mommy's song make you happy?" He nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "More than you'll ever know." Lily smiled, satisfied, and then ran to fetch her sketchbook. "I'm drawing something for Mommy today," she said, flipping to a new page. "It's going to be our family picture, you, me, and her." He hesitated. "You think she'd like that?" Lily looked up at him with absolute certainty. "She already does. She told me in my dream last night." He blinked. "You had dreamed of her?" She nodded. "She said she's proud of you. She said you finally learned what love really means." The words hit him like a wave, stealing his breath. He didn't know what to say, so he just reached out, gently touching her hair. "I hope she's right," he murmured. "She is," Lily said simply, returning to her drawing. "And she said I have to give you the letter soon, when the time feels right." Alexander froze, looking at her. "The letter?" But she didn't answer. She was already lost in her drawing, crayons moving quickly, humming her mother's tune again. He sat back, heart heavy with curiosity and fear. That small envelope sat on the counter, innocent and quiet, holding something he wasn't ready for yet. As he watched Lily color, smiling to herself, he knew deep down, whatever that letter contained, it was going to change everything. The day came quietly, like any other. The sky outside was gray, clouds rolling in slow and heavy. Lily sat curled up on the couch, her blanket wrapped around her like a cocoon, a faint flush coloring her cheeks. Alexander had canceled all his meetings, something his assistant had never heard him do before, and stayed home beside her. He placed a glass of warm milk on the table and brushed her hair back gently. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" She gave a small smile. "Just a little tired, but I'm okay." Her voice was soft, fragile, like a song that was losing its melody. He tried to smile back, but his chest ached with a heaviness he couldn't shake. For the past few days, she had been quieter, her laughter shorter, her energy fading little by little. The doctor said it was a viral infection, but Alexander could see something deeper, something that scared him. He stayed with her all day, reading her stories, helping her draw, even letting her style his hair with pink clips she'd found in her toy box. For every giggle she gave him, he tried to hide the fear in his eyes. As the afternoon light faded, Lily's hand tugged gently on his sleeve. "Mr. Alexander," she whispered, "can you read something for me?" He turned to her, noticing the small envelope she held out, the same one she'd given him days ago. His heart sank. "Now?" she nodded. "Mommy said I should give it to you when I feel ready." "And I think I'm ready." He hesitated, his throat tight. "Lily, are you sure?" Her eyes met his, so pure, so certain. "Yes, Mommy said this letter will make you cry first, but then you'll understand." He took the envelope with trembling hands. It was light, fragile, but the moment he held it, it felt heavier than anything he'd ever carried. He slowly tore it open and unfolded the paper. The handwriting wasn't Lily's. It was adult, elegant, familiar. Claire. The world around him seemed to stop. His eyes moved over the first line and his breath caught. "Alexander, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay long enough to tell you everything I wanted to. I know you never forgave yourself for the past, for leaving when you thought it was the right thing to do. But I want you to know, I never hated you, not once." His vision blurred as he read on. "You gave me Lily and she became my whole world. But more than that, she's your world too, even if you didn't know it yet. She has your stubbornness, your kindness, your eyes when she laughs. I told her about you. Not the man from the magazines or the headlines, but the man who once made me believe in dreams again." A tear fell onto the page, smudging the ink. He wiped it away quickly, but another followed. "When Lily asks you to read this, please don't see it as goodbye. See it as my reminder that love never really leaves. It just changes form. And if one day she finds her way to you, Promise me you'll keep her safe. Not out of guilt, but out of love. The same love we both once had. The final words shook him to his core. You were always more than you believed, Alexander. And now she'll remind you who you are. With all my love, Claire. He lowered the letter slowly, unable to speak. The sound of Lily's faint breathing filled the silence. When he looked down at her, she was watching him, eyes glistening. Did Mommy make you cry? She whispered softly. He smiled through the tears, shaking his head. No, sweetheart. She made me remember. Lily reached out, her tiny fingers brushing away one of his tears. She said you'd cry like that, she murmured. She said it means your heart's healing. He couldn't hold back anymore. He pulled her close, hugging her tightly, so gently as if she might break. You and your mother, he whispered, voice trembling. You've changed everything. Lily smiled weakly against his chest. Then we did what we were supposed to do. He closed his eyes, holding her a little tighter as thunder rumbled faintly outside. The storm was coming, but for the first time, he didn't feel alone in the dark. Because in that moment, between his tears, her warmth, and the echo of Claire's words, Alexander finally understood. Love doesn't end. It just finds new ways to stay. The night deepened and the storm outside began to pour. Raindrops streaked the wide windows like silver threads, and lightning occasionally flashed across the skyline. Inside, the penthouse felt like a world apart, still dim, filled with the steady hum of the city far below. Alexander sat beside Lily's bed, the letter from Claire resting on the nightstand. The air was heavy with the scent of rain and the faint sweetness of the lavender oil the nurse had brought earlier. Lily lay quietly beneath her blanket, her small hands clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. Her breathing was shallow but peaceful. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, his heart aching at the sight of her fragile form. You should rest now, he whispered. Tomorrow we'll make pancakes again, remember? She gave a faint smile. With extra syrup? He chuckled softly, his voice breaking. With extra everything. She turned slightly toward him, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Alexander, do you think Mommy can see us right now? He hesitated, his throat tight. I think she never stopped watching, he said quietly. She's here. She always has been. Lily smiled gently, her eyes half closed. Then I'm not scared. He swallowed hard. Scared of what, sweetheart? Of sleeping, she murmured. Mommy said when I get tired, she'll come for me, and we'll play our song together again. His heart cracked open at her words. He took her hand in both of his, trying to steady his voice. You're not going anywhere yet, okay? We still have to finish your drawings, and you promised to teach me that piano song. She smiled faintly. You already know it. You just don't remember. Her words hit him like a whisper from another time, something Claire might have said. The rain tapped softly against the windows as if echoing her fragile rhythm. Lily blinked slowly, her gaze drifting toward the nightstand. Mr. Alexander, the letter said something else, didn't it? He froze. What do you mean? She said. There's another letter. One for me. He turned quickly, reaching for the envelope again. Beneath Claire's letter, folded carefully at the bottom, was a smaller piece of paper. A child's handwriting on the front. For Lily. His hands trembled as he unfolded it and began to read softly, his voice barely holding together. My sweet Lily, if you're reading this, it means Mommy had to go somewhere beautiful. But don't worry, you're never alone. One day you'll meet someone who will love you just like I do. Maybe he'll be a little quiet, maybe a little sad, but he'll have the kindest heart. And when you meet him, tell him I said thank you for finding us again. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he read, his voice cracking with every word. Lily listened with her eyes closed, a peaceful smile curling her lips. When he finished, there was silence. Just the rain and the faint sound of her breathing. Did Mommy really write that? She whispered. He nodded, unable to speak. She knew you'd take care of me, Lily said softly. She told me you'd be my hero. He bent down, pressing his forehead against her small hand. You're the hero, Lily, he whispered. You and your mother both. The thunder rumbled again outside, distant and fading. Lily's eyes fluttered, her fingers loosening around his. I love you, Mr. Alexander, she murmured faintly. Tell Mommy, I'm not scared anymore. He lifted his head, panic surging through him as her breathing grew shallower. Lily, he whispered. Lily, stay with me. Her lips curved into one last peaceful smile. "It's okay. Mommy's here." And then silence. The storm raged on outside, but inside that quiet room, time stopped. Alexander sat frozen, tears streaming down his face, still holding her tiny hand as the world around him blurred into nothing. He didn't cry out. He couldn't. He just sat there, his heart shattering in quiet, unbearable grief, until dawn crept over the horizon, turning the sky soft and gold. Beside her still hand, the letter from Claire lay open, the words almost glowing in the new morning light. Love never really leaves, it just changes form. And for the first time, Alexander understood. Love had never left him. It had simply found its way back. Through the laughter, the drawings and the music of a little girl who had carried her mother's heart into his broken one. The morning after was silent, almost too silent. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean, glimmering under a pale sunrise. The penthouse, once filled with laughter and piano melodies, now felt unbearably still. The only sound was the faint rustle of the curtains swaying with the breeze. Alexander sat beside the piano, his hands resting on the keys but not pressing them. Lily's drawings still covered the walls, crayon hearts, stick figures, and a dozen suns with smiling faces. Her favorite stuffed bunny sat on the bench beside him, one ear slightly bent. It felt wrong to move it. In front of him lay the letter. The one that had started it all. "Can you read this letter? It's very important." The handwriting of a little girl who had changed his world. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply as the memories came. Her laughter, her voice calling him Mr. Alexander, her tiny hands guiding his on the piano, the way she looked at him like he was something good when he'd forgotten he could be. For a long moment he couldn't bring himself to move. Grief had a strange way of hollowing out the world. Everything still looked the same, but nothing felt the same. The light didn't shine the same way. The silence was louder now. Then slowly, he placed his fingers on the piano keys and began to play. The same melody Lily had learned from her mother, soft, gentle, and full of longing. Each note trembled as if it carried a memory. The sound filled the room, spilling into every corner like sunlight breaking through clouds. As he played, tears streamed down his face, but this time they weren't just from pain. There was something else in them, peace. Halfway through the song, his eyes fell on a new drawing propped against the piano. It must have been one of her last. It showed him and Lily sitting side by side, both smiling, surrounded by golden light. Above them, written in her uneven handwriting, were the words, "Now we're both happy, Mommy." He pressed his hand over his heart and let out a shaky breath. "You did it, Lily," he whispered. "You made me remember what love feels like." Days passed, then weeks. He made arrangements quietly, donated her toys to children's shelters, established a foundation in Claire and Lily's names to help orphans find homes. Every morning, he still sat at that same piano and played her song before starting his day. And every time he did, the pain felt a little softer, replaced by warmth, as if they were still there, listening. Months later, during the opening ceremony of the Lily's Light Foundation, Alexander stood on stage, looking out at the small crowd of children holding candles. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "There was once a little girl who taught me that love isn't measured by time, but by the hearts it touches," he said softly. "She reminded me that even when we lose someone, they never truly leave. Their love stays, in our memories, our kindness, and the people we become." He paused, glancing at the framed photo of Lily and Claire placed beside the podium. "I used to think success was about power," he continued, his tone steady. "But now I know when real success is about love, and theirs will live on forever." The audience rose in quiet applause, and for a brief moment Alexander looked up toward the light streaming through the skylight. It painted the room in gold like morning sunlight, warm and soft. He smiled faintly. "Thank you," he whispered almost to himself, "for finding your way back to me." That evening, when he returned home, he walked past the piano once more. He sat down, touched the keys, and began to play. Not out of sorrow, but out of remembrance. The melody echoed softly through the penthouse, drifting into the night air, reaching for the stars above. And somewhere beyond that quiet sky, in a place where pain no longer existed, a woman's voice whispered to a little girl beside her, both smiling as they listened. "See, Lily? He can play it perfectly now." The girl giggled, her small hand reaching toward the sound. "Mommy," she said softly. I told you he'd remember. And as the piano's final note faded into the night, the world felt whole again, bound together by a love that never ended, only changed form.